Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and today I want to find out which one of my plums tastes the best. For context, those plums are all from my farm, or the farm I'm taking care of, in Heidelberg, in Handschuhsheim, on the mountain called Steinberg, or Stone Mountain. Here you can see the orchards, here you can even see some of the plum trees. Yeah, they are all from this slope here. The climate, traditionally sown 7B, by now it's 8, probably 8A, because of climate change. Pretty warm and dry area for German standards, and the geology, we have some really strange crystalline type of quartz porphyre. And yeah, the whole slope is a nature reserve with lots of rare flowers and animals, and it's also a nature reserve because of the old orchards and rubble walls. I've been taking care of it for close to 15 years now, but I have not planted any of the plums I want to cover now. Well, let's see what we have here. By now I figured out most of them except for two where I'm not sure. Well, first, like with most domestic plants and like with most fruits, the systematics is very messed up. We are not absolutely sure where the domestic plum comes from. It's called Prunus domestica, the domestic plum. There is no wild domestic plum. We think that it's a hybrid of the Blackthorne, Prunus spinosa, and the cherry plum, Prunus cerasifera. Here I have 5 different types of cherry plum. But this is not completely sure. And also a lot of books on systematics of plums and a lot of websites, yeah, they are giving a lot of subspecies and varieties, but a lot of them also basically refuse to try any systematics. Well, let's see what I figured out about those fruit. Well, first here we have Prunus spinosa, the blackthorn, which is native in most of Europe. Then we have Prunus cerasifera, and the blackthorn grows wild here in the nature reserve. Prunus cerasifera is not native to Germany. It's native to, yeah, we are not exactly sure, like the Balkans, Black Sea area, Anatolia. Like with all useful plants, it has been transported to everywhere starting from the Stone Age, but we are sure that it's not native to Germany. So where do all those cherry plums come from? I mean, yeah, it's a tasty fruit, very reliable even in very bad fruit years. In some years the cherry plum will be pretty much the only fruit that will fruit profusely, because its flowers are very resistant to late frosts, and in general it's a much hardier thing than all the domestic plums. It's usually not planted as a fruit tree, but as a rootstock for domestic plums, and then, yeah, sometimes it outcompetes the graft, sometimes suckers develop, and as soon as the rootstock fruits and animals eat it, they will drop it somewhere and create new cherry plums. So now all the other plums I'll mention from now on are basically Prunus domestica. Down here we have 3 different green gauges: Prunus domestica, Subspecious Italia, var Claudiana. Here we have some really tasty green gauge, which, yeah, through most of its ripening process it stays quite green. You can eat it when it's still greenish yellowish, but when fully ripe it's quite bright yellow. Here we have the green gauge Graf Althans, which, since it's not very green, is probably a hybrid with some other fruit, but this is a variety where we really know where it originated from. It originated, I think, somewhere over 100 years ago in Bohemia on the estate of Graf Althans or Count Althans. And here we have some feral green gages. However, since they're a little bit colorful, I'm not sure if they are not some mix with the Mirabelle. Now let's jump to the Mirabelle plum. Those two bunches here are Mirabelle plums. The Mirabelle plum, Prunus domestica var syriaca. Well, for some time people thought that it originated in Central Europe because it's the fruit of choice of the city of Nancy in Lorraine in France. But nowadays people have returned back to the original opinion that it actually comes from Syria or Anatolia. That's why it was called syriaca originally. But as you see, we are not sure. I mean, plums are very important for human consumption, but like many other fruits and domestic plants important for human consumption, we know very little about them. Yeah, we cultivate them, and when it works out, we are happy, but we actually don't know exactly what we cultivate here. Here we have Prunus domestica, Subspecious domestica, the standard blue plum that's popular all around the world. In the Balkans, my grandfather still remembers the time when this was used for bartering trade, basically like a currency. Yeah, blue plums. A staple, basically, because they are quite tasty. You can transport them quite well, and you can make a lot of stuff from them. In the Balkans, we also used to cook with them and make something, well, we call chocolate out of them. Here we have some feral, blue plums. Basically, if an animal eats this, or even if a seed drops to the ground, it has a good chance to develop into a nutrient. There are lots of those feral blue plums here. Mostly they have slightly smaller fruit. As you can see, even those are not very big because those are some old trees with old varieties, but here we have the feral version of it. Actually, some people said that basically it's a waste of money to buy nursery plum trees, and it's basically a big scam to sell nursery plum trees to people because you can actually use seedlings and suckers, and they will be of the same quality. Let's find out. Here we have feral blue plums. Here we have planted blue plums, feral Mirabelle plums, planted Mirabelle plums, feral green gages, planted green gages. Well, of course, the Blackthorne is wild, the only one truly wild and truly native to the area here. And with the cherry plums, they are a mixture actually of rootstock. I think this one is definitely rootstock because I picked it on the base of this blue plum tree. This is the rootstock of a blue plum tree that has disappeared by now. Same goes for this one. And those are most probably seedlings or suckers from some rootstock. The color doesn't matter. Basically, we have a lot of different cherry plums. This is more or less the color variety you can get. Bright yellow, pale translucent yellow, dark purple with a lot of, well, this one and this one have this, have those little waxy things on the surface which are quite easy to rub off, and then the color which was quite whitish before becomes more bright. Here we have some other purple cherry plums which are not which don't have a lot of this whitish covering, and here some bright red ones. Well, which one is the tastiest? Of course, this is an unfair competition for several reasons. Different plums are used to different climates and different soils. Well, since they grow or I have been planted here, let's say that they are all more or less okay for this area. But of course, yeah, also it's important how you handle them after picking, but since I all picked them during the last half hour, I think that should be okay. But the most important thing is they ripen at different times of the year. And also they have different ways to cope with environmental stress. But I think here the most important thing will be that they ripen at different times of the year. You can see this with the green gauges. This very tasty yellow-green gauge. The tree was carrying hundreds of fruits, but I found only 2 which were still halfway edible. Well, this green gauge I find pretty much everything was green. Well, I mean unripe. They were not green, they were already a little bit colorful, but unripe. I found one which is more or less ripe, and I'm sure it has a worm, and one half-ripe one. And also the feral green gauges, they are not as green as they might appear, because they are not called green gauges for nothing. A lot of varieties are quite greenish even when ripish. But yeah, it's a little bit unfair to have underripe and overripe fruit and compare the taste. But I had to find a time where all the fruit here were fruiting. The only plum, well, the only 2 plum varieties I left out. One is actually one I planted myself, but it's a young tree and has no fruit this year. All those I haven't planted them, so I had to guess the varieties. And the other one is a very tasty plum, a plump, a blue plum type of plum, but it had a lot of fruit last year and almost no fruit this year, and yeah, I think they all dropped to the ground already. So yeah, as I said, the biggest issue I think is that they ripen at different times, and that we'll have to compare underripe with overripe fruit. Also you can see some of them, like for example, when we stick here with the cherry plums. Those yellow cherry plums, they had very few fruit, and so I think they don't have a lot of drought stress. Those purple cherry plums had a ton of fruit, and so as you can see, those are quite shriveled up, and this variety is usually more roundish, but now they are more drop shaped or elongated because the tree couldn't nourish them properly. And so yeah, without further distraction, let's go to the tasting. Well, first let's taste the Blackthorne, the wild Blackthorne. Those are actually only tasty either after frost or quite late in the year. So right now they are definitely underripe and will be sour and astringent. Yeah, underripe, sour and astringent. This is the type of fruit you chew during hikes in summer to relieve you of thirst, but then it gives you a dry, pelty mouth, so it's not such a big improvement. Now let's try the Mirabelle plums. Feral Mirabelle plums versus planted Mirabelle plums. To be honest, I think in this case the planted ones are much better. They are not only slightly bigger and much more colorful, but also taste-wise I like them more. So let's try here. Yeah, I'm not completely sure. Maybe those here, there is a whole plot on a neighboring, in a neighboring, well, former orchard, which is now covered by suckers of those feral Mirabelle plums. I don't know if they are suckering from an original fruit tree which has some Mirabelle as its rootstock, or if they are suckers that came from some original seedlings. But let's try those slightly greenish Mirabelles. Not bad. Taste-wise, I would say a mixture of blue plums, Mirabelles, green gauges. Now let's compare them with this planted Mirabelle tree. Much more sweet and with the typical Mirabelle flavor. So for the Mirabelles, the planted one in this case was definitely better than the feral one. Now let's try the blue plums. First the feral ones. Usually they are bigger, but we had drought stress for the last 3 years, so the trees are adapting. They are having a lot of fruit this year, the plums, a lot of fruit, except for a couple trees which have no fruit, or a few, but the fruit are quite small this year. Good. Juicy, sweet and sour. Not a perfect blue plum, but okay, this one is infected by this Japanese fruit fly. Not this also. Not a perfect blue plum. Oops, this also. Yeah, because of this Japanese fruit fly, you have to eat a lot of fruit, basically half ripe. Let's compare them with the planted blue plums, considerably bigger, but still smaller than most modern varieties. Again, much better. Not completely ripe. Still has some astringency and a little bit too much sourness and not enough sweetness, but already quite good. Most fruit are not perfect this year because despite 3 years of drought stress, the summer didn't have as much sun as I would have liked it. It was quite a sunny summer, but not perfectly sunny. Oh, I forgot to introduce this thing here. I'm pretty much unsure what it is. It is being used here in the suburb of Hanschussheim as a rootstock for different plums. The fruit are quite round. Oh, this is again infected by the fruit fly. The fruit are quite round, but the tree is like a column, very thin and upright. Not just the stem, but the whole tree. It can be like 8 to 10 to 12 times more tall than it is wide. The crown is basically like those cottonwood trees, which are not spreading like a normal cottonwood, but straight and upright. And I've seen it a lot. Well, at first I thought, because I saw a plot completely covered with those trees, that it's competition that makes them grow so fast upwards. But now I've seen also some plots where they are quite sparse suckers from rootstock of domestic plums. And yeah, the trees are the crown has a very columnar shape, but the fruit are very round. And I think this could be Prunus domestica, subspecies insititia or intermedia, or it could be any random hybrid between. Tasty. I don't know why it's being used only for rootstock. Tasty. More or less like a plum without much flavor, but with a slight bitterness. This bitterness of bitter almonds. You will get this bitterness when you crack the stone and eat the seeds all Prunus, out of all Prunus species. But in this one, even the flesh has the hint of this bitter almond bitterness. Quite interesting. I think people should breed something from this plum. So folks, this video is already quite long, and I have 7 more fruit to review. So I'll finish this video at this point and just start a new video. So stay tuned for at least another plum video from those interesting plum varieties here from Heidelberg. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.